I've noticed, and I'm probably very much not the only one who's noticed this, but ever since the sheer explosion of PC handhelds and just how just massively popular this whole industry has become ever since the Nintendo Switch first came out in 2017, ever since then we saw a steady increase in PC handhelds, alongside the explosion in the emulation handheld scene, filling needs that people have basically been unmet since probably the last attempts to make more home console-esque handhelds during the PS Vita and 3DS generation. And the Nintendo Switch was the first big step into satisfying the everlasting hunger of more and more powerful handhelds to have on the go. For the longest time though, it's actually been mostly contained to the PC industry. Mostly people wanting to play their games from Steam, on the go, essentially. There hasn't been a massive push from fellow console manufacturers, i.e. Sony and Microsoft, to actually make the jump into PC handhelds or making their own dedicated handheld console. Up until recently, we've started hearing rumblings for quite some time that both Microsoft and Sony are working on their own handhelds, to the point where Microsoft is almost beta testing the idea with a collaboration with Asus, making the ROG Xbox Ally that is coming out this October, which is incredibly exciting, but I honestly feel like it's more of an Ally 2 than it is a designated Xbox handheld. Yes, it has that modified version of Windows, or potentially just the Microsoft Xbox launcher. It's a whole thing people are debating right now. But it is a very good first step into seeing how interested the public might be in a dedicated Xbox handheld. And we've just seen this trend and just general sentimentality of wanting to be able to take your games with you wherever you go. And that really started with the Switch, which has been a massive player in this handheld space. And with the release of the Switch 2 finally giving a very necessary performance increase to the Switch library and Switch games, and for developers to have access to make their games better and bring bigger and bigger games to the platform, hasn't really materialized quite yet, but that is sort of hopefully the idea. And seeing that Sony is potentially also working on a handheld console of their own might be leading us into the direction of a handheld-dominated future, because with devices like the iNeo Next 2, with a full-fat 8060S integrated GPU, potentially more powerful or on par with some of the major consoles we currently play on. What I'm probably thinking of is the Xbox Series X, it being the closest related to. The PlayStation is its own island of PlayStation-ness, so I can't say for 100% certain it's going to be faster than the PlayStation 5, but it's probably going to be faster than the Xbox Series S, and probably on par with the Xbox Series X, so frankly, that's perfectly fine for me. But a crucial piece that a lot of these handheld consoles are missing, same thing is going to happen with the Xbox Ally, is that massive developer support. Getting their games specifically optimized to run the best it possibly could on a given set of hardware, which is something that a lot of these handhelds simply don't have, primarily because they just run Windows and are treated as computers at the end of the day. So there's none of that special sauce consoles have. And it's not anything to do with the actual hardware itself, it's just developers optimizing their games to the best of their abilities to match the given specific uniform hardware configuration. So they know exactly how much memory this platform is going to have, they know exactly the CPU clock speeds, they know exactly how hard they can push the graphics, which is something that handhelds, unlike the Switch, have not seen ever, with the minor exception of the Steam Deck. The Steam Deck has been a bit of a wild card this entire gaming era we find ourselves in, dominated by handhelds. They were one of some of the initial people to really kick off this renaissance of handheld gaming, but has since really stepped back and let the industry continue on relatively unchallenged. But that's primarily because Valve sees it more itself as a console developer, much like Microsoft and Sony, taking upwards to 8 years to develop their next handheld or console. So it makes a lot of sense, especially with the recent rumors of Valve working on a home console, it actually makes a lot of sense that Valve potentially is the new Sega, the next person to challenge console dominance. Granted, they don't necessarily have the numbers to really be a true, God's honest fourth pillar in the gaming community, but they certainly do make enough money to be considered that, because as we all know, Valve doesn't just make the Steam Deck, they clearly obviously make Steam, one of the most popular PC gaming platforms on the planet, being the primary place where millions and millions upon millions of people buy and play their games. Hosts to some of the biggest games in the world, like CSGO. They're probably one of the only manufacturers and developers of games and hardware that could potentially stand to make a challenge against the dominance of Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony. Like, Apple has the money and has in fact tried in the past with the Pippin Atmark, I believe is what it was called, their own attempt at a home console, but it's not like Apple's going to jump into the gaming industry now. Valve has been in the gaming industry for its entire life. It has evolved a lot in that time, whether that's from being a gaming developer studio or being a massively popular gaming platform, or what it is now, being heralded as one of the best handheld manufacturers for gaming devices. I'd love to envision a future of Sony, Microsoft predominantly making handhelds, because I personally love the handheld form factor the most. I love the ability to take my games everywhere I go. Yes, there will be caveats. It can't be nearly as powerful as what a home console could be. And if you were to make a console of that power portable, it might only last maybe a couple of hours. So this future might not be very predominant, but hopefully with the advent of ARM-based computing drastically increasing performance and battery life expectancy, we could potentially see a future dominated by handhelds that you simply dock at home, just like the Nintendo Switch, because that has been one of my favorite things of the Switch. The ability to dock my Switch, play my games, undock it, and pick up right where I left off. Nothing felt more like we were living in the future than the very first time I did that. It immediately felt like we were living in the future. Going back to play on my Xbox One felt so lame. Having to turn off my Xbox and go to the grocery store with my mom, and leaving my game behind, when I could have just grabbed my Switch and continued playing in the car. And seeing a future where Sony and Microsoft finally take that step in making a true handheld console of their own would be amazing to see. Having this level of intense competition in the handheld space is something that I feel like we've needed for a very, very long time, because let's be honest, the console space has been basically stagnant since 2015. There hasn't been a real reason to buy an Xbox console in probably 10 years, because any good game that came out on Xbox you could just play on PC better anyways. And now that they've almost functionally given up their independent status as a developer, releasing all their games on a bunch of other platforms now, there really isn't a reason to buy an Xbox. And if you're not a fan of third-person over-the-shoulder action-adventure games, there really isn't a reason to buy a PlayStation either. To me, all of PlayStation's exclusives look exactly the frickin' same. God of War originally had such a distinct and amazing visual style and unique gameplay that made it a massive amount of fun. Now it just looks and feels a little generic. That might be a hot take, but the new God of War games aren't bad, but they're just kind of boring to me. Nothing really grabs my attention when I've played them or seen them in the last few years. And there's only so many times you can replay The Last of Us and The Last of Us 2 and then The Last of Us Remastered, or The Last of Us 2 Remastered, or the HD remake of The Last of Us 1, where it's fully a remake, not a remaster. It's a whole thing, and it's just really a lot of the same kind of game, so it's not that intriguing. But Nintendo is a bit of the Nintendo island. You go there, you play your Nintendo games, that's it. I feel like a lot of the funnest things we're playing these days are already on all the consoles. Baldur's Gate, Elden Ring, all these massive third-party titles, it doesn't matter what console you have basically at this point. So I think a future dominated by slightly cheaper, more low-cost handhelds that have more optimized experiences to play your favorite games on the go might be a great way to sell people stuff. I would love to hear what you guys think about this down below. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe, all the social media garbage down below. And last but not least, have a wonderful day.